At the family meeting, my mother-in-law proposed that we split all household expenses evenly. I just smiled and agreed. But the very next day, when I calculated the true cost of living, the color drained from her face as she said, "We can't possibly do it like that." The dinner that evening was more elaborate than usual. There was seared salmon with a soy glaze, which my husband Kevin loved, and a pot of hearty homemade soup whose aroma filled the kitchen. But the atmosphere in the dining room was anything but warm, a stark contrast to the fragrant steam rising from the food. The ceiling fan overhead spun rhythmically, chopping the tense air into heavy, silent beats. I placed the flakiest piece of salmon onto my father-in-law's plate, then my mother-in-law's, before finally allowing myself a bite of rice. This had been the unspoken rule in this house for years. As the daughter-in-law, I was expected to serve first and eat last, to watch my words and walk on eggshells. Martha, my mother-in-law, was unusually well dressed tonight. She wore a cream-colored silk pantsuit, her coiffed hair perfectly in place, even though we were just eating at home. She ate slowly, occasionally peering at me over the top of the reading glasses perched on her nose. Her scrutinizing gaze made the food in my mouth taste bland. George, my father-in-law, stuck to his old habit, eating while watching the evening news on the large television in the adjoining living room. Kevin was glued to his phone, chuckling at short videos on TikTok, completely oblivious to his mother's serious expression. "Emily, could you move that soup bowl aside? I need to talk about something," Martha said suddenly. Her voice was measured, not loud but firm enough to make everyone pause their meal. I quickly did as she asked, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Martha dabbed her mouth with a napkin, took a sip of green tea, and then began, "Now that everyone's here, I want to call a family meeting. Times are different now. Out in the world, people are progressive, so we need to update our thinking at home, too. I find this current arrangement of pooling money to be inefficient." Kevin looked up, his eyes bright with interest. "You're right, Mom. My friends and their wives all keep their finances separate. It's so much easier." Martha nodded, pleased with her son's support, then turned her gaze directly to me. "See? Even Kevin agrees." I'm thinking, to avoid any of that mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law drama, where we're scrutinizing every penny and arguing about who's supporting whom, we should make a change. Starting next month, we're going to go Dutch. Groceries, utilities, all living expenses will be split evenly per person. Whatever you earn is yours to keep. No one asks about anyone else's income. I don't want to be accused of mismanaging my daughter-in-law's money. I set my fork down, my hands resting lightly in my lap as I tried to keep my breathing steady. My fingers dug into the fabric of my slacks. So, this was it. For years, I had managed the household finances. Kevin's monthly take-home pay was about $3,000. He would transfer $1,000 to me as his contribution. The remaining $2,000 he kept for his coffee, gadgets, clothes, and maintaining his image with friends. My salary, with commissions, was over $5,000 a month. I covered everything from toiletries and groceries to George and Martha's medical co-pays and gifts for both sides of the family. Every month, I had to dip into my personal savings, but I kept quiet, wanting to keep the peace. Now, Martha's words implied that I had been siphoning money from her son, or did she think his $3,000 salary was so substantial that I was taking advantage of it? I glanced at Kevin. He was winking at his mother, a triumphant look on his face, as if a great weight had been lifted. He probably thought that by splitting everything, he'd have more money, or that the household expenses were trivial. George cleared his throat, about to say something, but one sharp look from his wife silenced him. He looked down and finished his meal. I saw the calculation in Martha's shrewd eyes. She saw me as a small-town girl who had struck gold by marrying her city-born son, lucky to live in this high-end condo. She was afraid I was secretly sending money back to my parents. A wave of indignation rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Years of being her daughter-in-law had taught me that arguing would only make her brand me as disrespectful. So I smiled, the gentlest smile I could manage. "You're absolutely right, Martha. In this day and age, clarity prevents hurt feelings." I've felt bad that I haven't always kept detailed records of how I spend Kevin's contribution, and I wouldn't want you to worry. Let's do it your way. Fair and square sounds much more comfortable. Martha looked momentarily stunned. She probably hadn't expected me to agree so quickly and placidly. She must have thought I would cry, list my sacrifices, or throw a fit, fearing I would lose out. Seeing my cheerful acceptance only fueled her smugness. There, see? A sensible daughter-in-law makes me so happy. We'll start tomorrow. After dinner, I'll list all the expenses for the month. Of course, I replied, ladling more soup into Kevin's bowl. Eat up. You'll need your strength for all the bookkeeping tomorrow. Kevin grinned. Don't you worry. We men are quick with numbers. I looked down at my plate, hiding the cold glint in my eyes. The salmon in my mouth no longer tasted sweet. It was tinged with the flavor of cold, hard calculation. My in-laws wanted to be fair and square. Fine. I would show them what fair and square truly meant. They had forgotten one fundamental thing, the very foundation they were standing on, the roof over their heads. Who did it really belong to? The meal ended on a high note for my husband and mother-in-law. They had no idea they had just lit the fuse that would blow apart the fragile peace I had worked so hard to maintain. That night, lying next to a snoring Kevin, I couldn't sleep. I opened my phone, looking at my bank balance and the photos of the property deed stored in a secure folder. Tomorrow was going to be a very long day. The next morning, I took a half day off from work, telling them I had a routine health checkup. In reality, I drove to my parents' house to retrieve something important. The original deed to the condo we were living in. My in-laws were vaguely aware of the situation, but they chose to ignore it. Before Kevin and I were officially married, my parents, worried about their daughter moving to a big city and living in cramped rental apartments, had liquidated their retirement savings and sold a piece of land back home. They gave me $120,000 for the down payment on this condo. I took out a mortgage for the rest. Because all the paperwork, the purchase agreement, and the title transfer was completed in my name before our wedding day, the condo was legally my separate property. At the time, Kevin's salary was meager, and he had a penchant for expensive hobbies. My parents didn't trust him, so they insisted the property be solely in my name, with everything finalized before we signed our marriage license. My father had said, "What's mine is yours," is a nice thought, but it's better to be secure. You never know what life will throw at you. Back then, I thought they were being overly cautious. Now, I saw their judgment was razor sharp. For the past 3 years, Kevin and his family had treated this place as their ancestral home. They invited guests over, bragging about the spacious layout, the beautiful view, and the luxury furnishings, treating me like a convenient, built-in accessory. Kevin had never contributed a single dollar to the mortgage or property taxes. The money he gave me each month barely covered the grocery and utility bills for 4 adults who used resources wastefully. I held the crisp deed in my hand. The paper felt cool, but my heart was burning. I stopped by a copy shop to make several certified copies, which I placed carefully in a file folder. I got home earlier than usual that afternoon. Martha was on the couch watching TV, cracking sunflower seeds and letting the shells litter the oak floor I had just cleaned the night before. She didn't look up when I came in, merely asking, "You're back? What did you get from the store? Remember to save the receipts. We'll settle our first day's accounts tonight." I didn't answer. I went to my room, put my bag down, and waited. Kevin came home soon after, drenched in sweat. He stormed in, ripped off his dress shirt, threw it on the sofa, and yelled, "Honey, turn on the AC. I'm dying, and get me a glass of orange juice, will you?" I walked out of the bedroom, but instead of a glass of juice, I was holding the file I had prepared. I placed it on the glass coffee table with a decisive thud. "You and Mom, please sit down. I have something to discuss." Sensing my unusual tone, Martha muted the TV and frowned. "What is it now?" I already said we'd settle the accounts tonight. Kevin, looking bewildered, sat down, still clutching the remote. "What's wrong with you, Emily? You look like you're ready to kill someone." I sat across from them, my back perfectly straight. I pushed the folder towards them. Last night you both proposed that we live fair and square, with separate finances and equally split expenses. I've thought it over, and I fully support the idea. But to be truly and completely fair, we have to account for the single largest expense that everyone seems to have forgotten. What expense? Martha asked, her voice turning sharp. The rent, I said, enunciating each word clearly. Legally and financially, this condo is my property, purchased with my parents' money and my income. I opened the folder to the first page, revealing a copy of the deed, clearly showing my maiden name, Emily Anderson, and an issuance date 2 months before our marriage registration. Kevin lunged forward, snatched the paper, and his face turned from red to a deathly pale. What is this? What kind of game are you playing? This is our house. Your parents gave it to us when we got married. You're mistaken, I cut in, my voice cold as ice. They gave it to me, not us. The $120,000 down payment was wired directly from my parents' account to the developer. All legal proceedings for this home were completed under my sole ownership before we were legally married. The monthly mortgage payments come from my salary. You haven't contributed a single cent to this property. Therefore, under the law, it is my premarital asset. Martha grabbed the deed from her son's hand, her own hand trembling. She stammered, "But you married Kevin. What's yours is his. Are you trying to start a war? Are you trying to kick your husband's parents out onto the street?" I looked at her, my eyes no longer holding any trace of submissiveness. Calm down, Martha. I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm simply implementing the fair and square policy you proposed last night. If we're going to split the cost of groceries and utilities, we have to split the cost of housing. No one gets to live in someone else's house for free forever. Especially when we're all supposed to be financially independent, right, Mom? How dare you nickel and dime your own family? Martha was speechless, her face flushed with rage. You taught me how, I replied, my voice light but razor sharp. You wanted fairness, so I'm giving you fairness. This is a 3-bedroom condo with premium furnishings in a prime location. The current market rent is no less than $3,000 a month, but since you're family, I'll give you a discounted rate of $2,500. Kevin slammed his fist on the table. Emily, that's enough. Have you lost your mind? I stood up, looking down at him, who now resembled a rooster doused in cold water. You have no right to raise your voice here. If you don't agree, you're free to move out. Let's see how you manage to rent a decent place for you and your parents in this neighborhood on your $3,000 a month salary. Do you think that's possible? Or were you planning on moving your parents back to that dilapidated old apartment building you grew up in? The room fell silent, the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner unit outside. The naked truth was laid bare. They realized that the comfortable home they were so proud of was nothing but a sandcastle built on my goodwill. And now that my goodwill was being measured in dollars and cents, that castle was beginning to crumble. The air in the living room grew thick and suffocating, worse than the most humid summer day. Martha sank into the couch, clutching her chest and muttering incoherently about ungrateful daughters-in-law and the misfortune of her family. George came out of his bedroom, saw the tense scene, and looked confused. After Kevin gave him a quick, bitter summary, he just sighed heavily, sat in a corner, and tried to light a cigarette, but his hands were shaking too much to work the lighter. I remained calm on the outside, but a storm was raging within me. I took no pleasure in backing them into a corner like this, but even a worm will turn. I couldn't continue being a cash cow for them to milk dry, both financially and emotionally. Let me break down the numbers so everyone understands, I said, pulling a pen and paper from my purse and writing in large, clear figures. The rent is $2,500 a month. There are 4 adults in this house, so splitting it evenly, that's $625 per person. I looked up at the 3 distorted faces across from me. As the owner and a resident, I will cover my own share of $625. The remaining 3, Dad, Mom, and Kevin, will be responsible for the rest. That comes to a total of $1,875 per month, payable to me. $1,875, Martha shrieked, her voice cracking. Are you insane? Kevin only makes $3,000. If you take that much, what will he live on? And where are we supposed to get money? Your father's pension is only $800 a month, and I'm a homemaker. Are you trying to kill us? Martha, have you already forgotten the rule you just made? I smiled, a smile I knew she found infuriating. Whatever you earn is yours to keep. No one asks about anyone else's income. I don't need to know where Kevin or you get the money. I just know that I am providing a service housing, and I must be compensated. It's the law of the market. Kevin's voice softened, a desperate attempt to appeal to our marriage. Emily, this is just cruel. We're husband and wife. How can you be so calculating? Like we're strangers. I know Mom was wrong to say what she did, but you're the bigger person. Can't you just let it go? I looked at him, my gaze a mixture of disappointment and contempt. The let it go speech again? Kevin, when your mother demanded we split the grocery bill, you were her biggest cheerleader. Where was this talk of husband and wife then? Why didn't you tell her that your wife works hard and you should cover her? Now that it affects your wallet, you bring up our marriage. It's too late for that. I continued my list. Besides rent, there are utilities, electricity, water, condo association fees, and internet. Last month's total was about $400. Divided by 4, that's $100 each. So, all in all, this family will need to budget approximately $2,275 each month to continue living here with all the current amenities. Martha burst into tears. She wasn't crying out of remorse, but out of the sheer horror of losing money. "Oh, dear God," she wailed, "I've raised a viper in my own home. She's stealing my house and strangling her in-laws for money." I stood up and collected my files. "Save your tears, Martha. It's a waste of energy. If you think my price is too high, feel free to check the listings in this area. The unit next door, which is smaller and has basic furnishings, is currently renting for $2,800 a month to an expat. My price of $2,500 already includes a significant family discount." I paused for a moment, delivering the final blow. "You all have 3 days to decide. If you do not agree to pay, I will have to ask you to move out. I can easily rent this place out to someone else and use that money to get a small apartment for myself. Frankly, living alone would be cheaper and far more pleasant than supporting a house full of ungrateful people who call me a freeloader." With that, I walked into my bedroom, closed the door, and turned the lock. Outside, the cacophony of Martha's sobs, George's heavy sighs, and Kevin's frustrated fist hitting the wall created a tragic symphony. I lay down on my bed, my body exhausted but my mind feeling incredibly light. A sense of freedom, of being in control of my own life, was spreading through me. I knew this was just the beginning of the battle, and they wouldn't give up easily. But I held all the cards. The deed was in my name. The law was on my side. They could preach morality at me all they wanted, but they couldn't use morality to live in my house for free. The next morning, I found a handwritten note from Kevin on the dining table. In his messy scrawl it read, "Mom, Dad, and I agree to pay rent. But can we owe you for the first month and reduce the price to $1,500? I scoffed, took a red pen, crossed out $1,500, and wrote $1,875 in large, bold numbers before taping the note to the refrigerator. This was a game of fair and square, and there was no room for negotiation. My in-laws' acceptance of the $1,875 rent was something I had anticipated. Their pride was sky high, but their financial capabilities were inversely proportional. They would rather grit their teeth and pay me than be seen moving into a dingy apartment or a condo in the distant suburbs, losing face with friends and relatives. And Kevin, with his precious team lead title at a department with only 3 employees, couldn't bear the thought of a long commute. But their acceptance came with a palpable hostility. On Monday morning, as I stepped out of my bedroom to get ready for work, the first thing I saw was the refrigerator. It was no longer the well-stocked appliance filled with the fruits, yogurts, and fresh meat I usually bought on weekends. Its door was plastered with so many yellow sticky notes, it looked like a community bulletin board. I opened it. It was completely empty. My section, where I kept a carton of organic milk for everyone to share, was bare. The vegetable crisper was wiped clean. The only thing left was a single plastic container with a few eggs inside, a sticky note with Martha written on it slapped on top. Kevin was at the table, chewing on a piece of dry toast. Seeing me staring at the fridge, he said sarcastically, "Mom's orders. If we're going fair and square, everyone buys their own food." She moved all her and Dad's stuff to the mini fridge in the storage closet. "This one's empty. You can put whatever you want in it, but don't touch anyone else's things." I laughed out loud. The mini fridge in the closet was a decrepit old thing that rattled like a tractor. I'd tried to throw it out multiple times, but Martha, ever the hoarder, had insisted on keeping it. Now she was using it to demarcate her territory. "Fine by me," I said simply. I took a bottle of homemade almond milk from my bag, poured a glass, and drank it. Kevin watched me, swallowing hard. Normally, I would have made breakfast for everyone. Oatmeal, or at least scrambled eggs and toast. Not anymore. "Did you eat?" I asked politely. "Just toast," he grumbled. "Hey, do you have $5 I can borrow for gas?" "Mom took my whole paycheck to cover the rent you're charging. I'm completely broke." I looked at his pathetic state. His shirt was wrinkled, his face gaunt from stress and poor nutrition. "If you're borrowing, there has to be interest. It's better if we just avoid it altogether. You'll have to figure it out yourself." With that, I put on my heels and walked out the door. Kevin glared at my back with resentment, but I didn't care. When I had taken care of his every need, he took it for granted. Now that I had withdrawn that care, he saw me as a villain. It's strange how people only appreciate what they've lost. That evening, on my way home from work, I stopped at the supermarket. I bought just enough for myself, a nice fillet of salmon, a bunch of asparagus, a pre-made salad, and a few containers of the expensive Greek yogurt I liked. When I got home, Martha was in the kitchen, cooking. The strong smell of fried sausage filled the air. On the dining table was a plate of overcooked canned green beans and a bowl of instant ramen. It was a meal of extreme austerity. It seemed that after paying my exorbitant rent, her food budget had been slashed to the bone. She saw my grocery bag and glanced at the bright pink salmon fillet. "Eating like a queen," she sneered. "Even a mountain of money can be spent." I said nothing, quietly putting my food in a plastic container, writing "Emily" in large letters on the lid with a permanent marker, and placing it in the main refrigerator. "Mom, I just need to use the stove for a minute," I said. "Wait, I'm not done," she snapped. I stood patiently as she dished out her food, watching her deliberately move in slow motion, wiping down the stove over and over. By the time she was finished, it was already 7 p.m. I quickly seared my salmon and steamed the asparagus. In 15 minutes, my nutritious dinner was ready. I brought my plate to the table and sat opposite my in-laws' meager spread. George looked from my fish to his ramen and sighed. Kevin ate with his head down, shoveling food into his mouth as if afraid someone would steal it, but I knew he was craving my meal. He was a picky eater, and there was no way canned beans and instant noodles could satisfy his pampered stomach. I put on my headphones and watched a movie on my phone as I ate, completely tuning out the dreary world around me. Suddenly, I saw Kevin's hand reach across the table, his fork aiming for a stalk of my asparagus. I moved just as quickly, blocking his fork with my own. "Kevin, what are you doing? I bought this. My name is on the container. Have you forgotten?" He pulled his hand back, his face flushing with shame and anger. "It's just a piece of asparagus. Why are you so stingy? I'm your husband." "Husband or not, we have rules now," I said, taking off my headphones and speaking loudly enough for Martha to hear. "As Mom taught us, you eat what you buy. If you want asparagus, give me money tomorrow, and I'll pick some up for you. I'll even add a small fee for my time and labor." Martha slammed her chopsticks down. "Don't beg from her, son. It's humiliating. Just eat your ramen. It's good for you. We don't need anything from a daughter-in-law who counts every last penny." I shrugged and went back to enjoying my dinner. The salmon was buttery and melted in my mouth. I had never tasted food so delicious. Perhaps its flavor was seasoned with freedom and pride. Later that night, around midnight, I heard a noise from the kitchen. I peeked out my door and saw Kevin sneaking to the refrigerator, wolfing down one of my Greek yogurts. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. The camera flash startled him, making him drop the container. Yogurt splattered all over the floor. "Kevin," I said calmly, "that yogurt costs $2. The fee for cleaning the floor is $5. You owe me a total of $7. Please Venmo me tomorrow." I turned and went back to my room, leaving him frozen in the middle of the white, sticky mess, his face ashen. This war was just getting started. The first fair and square weekend was painfully tense. On Sunday morning, instead of sleeping in, I was awakened by Martha calling my name from the living room. I checked the clock. It was only 8 a.m. When I emerged, the entire family was gathered around the coffee table. Kevin was yawning, George was pensively smoking, and Martha was meticulously writing in an old, leather-bound notebook. Seeing me, she pushed her glasses up her nose and cleared her throat. "Sit down, Emily. Since it's the end of the week, I want to settle the shared household expenses. I believe in full transparency, so my daughter-in-law can't say I'm cheating her." I sat down, eyeing the thick notebook. Martha opened it to a page filled with cramped handwriting, detailing every minor expense. She began to read aloud, her voice as stern as a judge delivering a verdict. Kikkoman soy sauce, 1 bottle, $4.50. Iodized salt, 1 container, $1.20. Garlic and onions, $3. Fresh chili peppers, $2. Natural gas, prorated by day of use. She went on, listing everything from the smallest kitchen spices to shared cleaning supplies. I listened in silent admiration of her memory and her astonishing level of pettiness. It turned out that even though she hadn't cooked for me all week, she had meticulously calculated my share of the common seasonings. The grand total for shared kitchen and cleaning supplies, plus electricity for the common areas and shared water usage, comes to— Martha paused, tapping her finger on a number circled in red ink. $140. I raised an eyebrow. $140 for 1 week? That seems unreasonable. I looked at the list she handed me. She had included the cost of a new mop, a bottle of toilet bowl cleaner, and a case of Heineken that Kevin and George had drunk the other night. "You're splitting this 4 ways, correct?" I asked calmly. "Of course," Martha replied instantly, her face confident. 4 people, 4 ways. That's the fairest approach. $140 divided by 4 is $35. That's your share. Let's just round it up to make it even. You can just give me cash." Kevin, sitting beside her, perked up at the mention of me paying, his eyes lighting up. He probably thought this was a chance to reclaim some of his lost pride. I took the notebook and flipped through the pages, examining it closely. Martha's accounting was flawless, but she had forgotten one crucial detail. The fair and square principle she championed was a double-edged sword. She had tallied her expenses but conveniently ignored mine. "Your calculations are very detailed, Martha," I said, nodding in mock praise, "but I have a few questions. This case of beer was consumed by Kevin and Dad. I didn't have a single drop. Why am I being charged for it? And this new mop was purchased because you broke the handle on the old one. Why is that a shared expense?" Martha froze, her face turning a shade darker. She stammered, trying to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "You know what? For the sake of family harmony, I won't quibble over these minor details. I agree to pay the $35. Martha let out a sigh of relief, a triumphant smile returning to her face. She held out her hand. "Then pay up. Cash is quicker. I need to go to the market." I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Just a moment, Martha. This is a 2-way settlement. You've presented your invoice. Now it's my turn to present mine. Just let me connect my phone to the TV so everyone can see clearly. The screen is much bigger." Before she could object, I had mirrored my phone screen to the giant smart TV in the living room. An Excel spreadsheet appeared, its rows and columns neatly organized and color-coded a world away from the messy scrawl in Martha's notebook. My in-laws stared at the screen, their jaws agape. They had no idea that ever since they declared war, I had been meticulously documenting everything. On the 65-inch screen, the family expense and labor invoice looked incredibly official. I held the TV remote like a professor's pointer and began my presentation. Item number 1, repairs and maintenance. I pointed to the first line. Last Tuesday, the light bulb in the shared bathroom burned out. I called an electrician to replace it. Here is the digital receipt for the bulb and labor. Total, $75. On Thursday, the downstairs toilet was clogged because someone flushed too many paper towels. I had to call a plumber. Cost, $150. I glanced at Kevin, who immediately looked down. He was the culprit, with his habit of spending an hour in the bathroom smoking and playing games on his phone. Item number 2, shared personal supplies, I continued. Martha, for your back pain, you asked me to buy you a box of pain relief patches. I bought the best ones from Japan. Cost, $30. And your phone's screen protector was cracked, so I had it replaced with an anti-spy version. Cost, $20. I paid for all of this with my credit card. The statements are all here. Martha was starting to sweat. She never imagined I would remember, let alone document, such trivial things. She thought the screen protector was a thoughtful gift from her daughter-in-law. Little did she know, it went straight into my spreadsheet of debts. And now, for the most important item, I said, my voice firm as I switched to a new tab on the spreadsheet. Labor costs for household services. What? Kevin yelped. What labor costs? We don't have a maid. That's right. We don't hire outside help, I said calmly, but the housework still needs to be done. I used to do it for free, out of love. But now that we're fair and square, my labor has a monetary value. I pointed to the screen, where the numbers danced before their eyes. According to current market rates, housekeeping services cost about $25 an hour. This past week, I cleaned the living room, kitchen, and shared bathrooms a total of 3 times, each taking about 2 hours. That's 6 hours of labor. At $25 an hour, that comes to $150. I looked at Martha, whose mouth was hanging open. I pressed on. Additionally, I cooked 4 dinners for the entire family early in the week before you decided to eat separately. A conservative estimate for a personal cook is $15 per meal. 4 meals, that's $60. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. So, the total expenses I've covered for the family this week, including repairs, supplies, and my labor, comes to a grand total of $485. I turned to Martha with a businesslike smile. The math is simple. I spent $485. My personal share, divided by 4, is approximately $121. That means the family owes me the remaining $364. Now, let's offset the debts. I owe you $35 for groceries. The family owes me $364. Subtracting what I owe you, the new balance is that you owe me $329. The room was dead silent, save for the ticking of the wall clock. Martha's face went from red to purple. She never imagined her debt collection attempt would backfire so spectacularly. She clutched her notebook, her hands shaking, wanting to rip it to shreds. "You're charging your mother-in-law for housework?" she hissed through clenched teeth. "What kind of daughter-in-law are you?" "Don't get upset, Martha," I said, maintaining my polite demeanor. "If you can charge me for a chili pepper, then I can certainly charge you for my sweat and tears." Fair and square means no exceptions. It was George who finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Just pay her, Martha. We made the rules. We have to follow them. Stop arguing before the neighbors hear." Humiliated. Martha burst into tears, but she was powerless against my logic and clear evidence. She fumbled in her pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, counted it, and threw it on the table. "Here, $329. Take it and buy yourself some decency." I calmly picked up the bills, smoothed them out, and put them in my wallet. "Thank you, Martha. I'll put this in my savings. It's always good to have a fund, just in case someone gets sick and needs a loan." Kevin stared at me as if I were a monster. "You've changed, Emily," he muttered. "You're terrifying." "Everyone has to grow up sometime, Kevin," I replied, turning off the TV. Meeting adjourned. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I walked back to my room, leaving a funereal atmosphere behind me. I knew the war had just entered a new, more brutal phase. They wouldn't dare ask me for anything, and they would look for any opportunity to find fault with me. But I wasn't afraid. Once you taste financial and mental freedom, it's more addictive than any drug. After the horrifying Sunday settlement, our home descended into a full-blown Cold War. Verbal communication ceased almost entirely, replaced by sticky notes plastered everywhere. On the washing machine, 0.5 per hot shower. These, of course, were Martha's petty retaliations. I happily complied. I started taking my laundry to a professional service. It came back cleaner, smelling fresh, and perfectly folded. As for showering, I used the facilities at the upscale gym near my office, where I could enjoy a hot shower and a sauna before heading home. But the biggest problem was cleanliness. Since I had set my housekeeping rate at $25 per hour, both Martha and Kevin refused to hire me. "It's our house. We'll clean it ourselves," they declared. However, years of laziness and dependency were ingrained in them. Martha would give the floor a cursory sweep, but mopping or scrubbing the toilets was out of the question, citing her aching back. Kevin was even worse. He'd leave his dirty dishes on the table and stuff empty beer cans and chip bags under the sofa. Within 3 days, our luxury condo started to resemble a garbage dump. The floors were sticky with grease and grime. The sink was piled high with unwashed dishes, emitting a sour stench. The kitchen trash was overflowing, leaking a foul-smelling liquid onto the floor, attracting ants and flies. I'd come home from work and feel like I was stepping into a landfill. The stench was nauseating, but I said nothing and did nothing. I walked straight to my bedroom, the only pristine sanctuary in the house, closed the door, turned on my air purifier, and lit a lavender-scented candle, creating a private oasis away from the chaos. That evening, I heard clattering in the kitchen, followed by the sound of a plate shattering, then Martha's yelling, "If you're done eating, wash your own plate." "Are you waiting for the ants to carry it away?" "You wash it, Mom. I worked all day. I'm exhausted." Kevin shot back, "My back is killing me." "Your wife is home. Why don't you ask her? You're the one who said we wouldn't hire her. If we ask now, we'll have to pay." They bickered back and forth, but neither would give in. They left the pile of dirty dishes and went to bed, perhaps hoping a fairy godmother would magically clean up after them. But this wasn't a fairy tale. There was only me, Emily, relaxing with a face mask and listening to meditation music, enjoying the peace of being an outsider. The next morning, the situation had worsened. The shared bathroom reeked of urine because no one had bothered to clean it. Used toilet paper was strewn across the floor. I peeked in and shook my head in disgust. Their pride was being tested by the very filth they had created. I left for work, dressed immaculately and wearing a lovely perfume. Before I left, I placed a note on the dining table, right next to the pile of dirty dishes. Specialized cleaning services, hazardous waste removal. Accumulated trash. $50. Biohazard decontamination, neglected bathroom. $30. Contact landlord to schedule. Kevin read the note, his face twisting in a grimace. He looked at the disgusting pile of dishes, then back at my note. A fierce internal battle waged, but his stinginess won. He swore under his breath and left for work, leaving the house to fester in its own squalor. This wasn't just a war about money anymore. It was a contest of endurance. Who could tolerate the filth longer? And knowing my in-laws' obsession with appearances, I knew they wouldn't last. Just as I predicted, their breaking point arrived on Friday, not out of self-awareness, but due to an external catalyst. That afternoon, I received a text from Tiffany, Kevin's younger sister. She was a college student living in a dorm, only coming home to ask for money. The text was short. "Emily, I'm bringing my boyfriend home tonight to meet everyone. He's super rich. Make sure the house looks amazing and dinner is perfect. Don't embarrass me." I smirked. "Make sure" was code for, "I expect you to do everything." I texted back, "Sorry, I have a client dinner and won't be home early. You should ask your mom to prepare everything." I turned off my phone, picturing the chaos that was about to unfold. I was sure Tiffany had already called Martha. Sure enough, when I arrived home that evening, I walked into a spectacular scene. The house, which had looked like a disaster zone, was in a state of frantic cleaning. A shirtless, sweating Kevin was furiously scrubbing the filthy toilet. Martha was mopping the floor while cursing under her breath. Her aching back seemed to have miraculously healed, thanks to the powerful medicine of saving face. Seeing me, Martha glared. "You're finally home. Go clean the kitchen. Tiffany is bringing her boyfriend over any minute. We can't let him see the house looking like a pigsty." I calmly took off my shoes and poured myself a glass of water. "Martha, as I've said, I provide services for a fee. If you want me to clean the kitchen, the rate is $20. If you want me to cook a multi-course dinner, it's $50, not including the cost of ingredients. If you agree, transfer the money and I'll start right away." You're trying to extort your own mother-in-law?" she shrieked, pointing her mop at me. "It's a simple business transaction," I replied with a professional smile. "You can do it yourself or hire someone else, but it might be hard to find a cleaner on such short notice." Martha looked at the clock. It was already 6 p.m., and her guest was arriving at 7. She gritted her teeth and yelled for Kevin. "Kevin, get out here and give her the money. Hurry, we're running out of time." Kevin ran out of the bathroom, still holding the toilet brush, his face scrunched in annoyance. "I don't have any money. You took my whole paycheck, remember?" Furious, Martha stormed into her bedroom and came back with a $50 bill. "Here, clean that kitchen until it shines. I've already ordered catering from a restaurant for dinner. I don't need you cooking. You'd probably poison the food." I took the 50, pocketed it, and said, "All right, kitchen cleaning it is. I'm a professional. You can count on me." I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. With years of housekeeping experience, it only took me 30 minutes to transform the grimy kitchen into a sparkling, clean space. I was working for money, so I was thorough, wiping down every surface and neatly arranging the dishes. When Tiffany arrived with her boyfriend, the house was immaculate and smelled fresh. Her boyfriend, James, was in his early 30s, wearing polished designer shoes and a Rolex watch. He was clearly wealthy. As he entered, he offered a polite compliment. "Your home is lovely, Mrs. Higgins, so clean and beautiful." Martha beamed, all her earlier frustration forgotten. "Oh, thank you, James. I'm a stickler for cleanliness. I have to clean it several times a day." I, standing in the corner of the kitchen, had to stifle a laugh. The hypocrisy was astounding. The catered dinner was lavishly spread on the table. Martha eagerly invited James to sit. I was about to retreat to my room when Tiffany grabbed my arm. "Emily, come eat with us. It's a family dinner. Where are you going?" I looked at my sister-in-law. Normally, she treated me like I was invisible. This sudden warmth was clearly for show. She wanted to project the image of a happy, harmonious family for her rich boyfriend. I nodded. "Okay, I should refuel after all that hard work anyway." I sat down across from James. The meal began with hollow pleasantries and Martha's bragging about her family's good standing and her brilliant son, the manager. Then, after the appetizers, Martha turned to me with a statement that left me stunned. "Oh, Emily, I was so exhausted after cleaning the living room and bathroom earlier. Since that's a common area and you also get to enjoy the cleanliness, I'll charge you a discounted rate. Just give me $30 for my labor. We should keep things fair and civilized, especially with a guest here." I looked at Martha, then at Kevin and Tiffany, who were smirking. So, this was their trap. They were using my own strategy against me, trying to humiliate me in front of a guest or force me to pay to save face for the family. They thought that with a stranger present, I wouldn't dare to fight back. James looked from Martha to me, a flicker of confusion on his face. I looked my mother-in-law straight in the eye and gave her my most radiant smile. I pulled out my phone. "You're so right, Martha. Fairness is so civilized. I'm sorry I was busy with the paid kitchen job you hired me for and couldn't help out. It's $30, right? Do you have a Zelle or Venmo QR code?" "It's faster." I spoke loudly and clearly, without a hint of shame or anger. Martha was taken aback, not expecting such a swift response. She fumbled with her phone to show me her QR code. The notification sound of a successful transfer chimed. "There you go. All set," I said, putting my phone away. "By the way, after dinner, could you settle up with me for the $50 for the kitchen cleaning?" The cash you gave me didn't cover the heavy-duty cleaning supplies I had to use, which were an extra $20. Also, this catered meal cost about $120. Once we split it among the four of us, I'll be sure to send you my and Kevin's share. Martha's face went rigid. She had tried to corner me, only to have me turn the tables and transform the dinner into a public debt negotiation right in front of her potential son-in-law. James watched the drama unfold, his expression shifting from surprise to amusement, with a hint of pity for his girlfriend's family. He took a slow sip of wine, hiding a smirk. This meet the parents dinner was turning out to be more entertaining than he'd expected. The atmosphere at the dinner table became so awkward you could slice it with a knife. After my counterattack, Martha's face was a mask of forced cheerfulness. She turned to James, her hand trembling as she placed a piece of chicken on his plate. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. "James, dear, have some more chicken. It's organic, free range. Don't mind us women and our little calculations." James smiled politely. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins. Your family has a very interesting approach to financial management. It's certainly transparent." His words sounded like a compliment, but the underlying sarcasm was unmistakable. Tiffany, sitting next to him, was blushing beet red with humiliation. She nudged her mother, signaling her to change the subject. Martha got the hint and launched into her pre-rehearsed monologue. "Our family, you know, we may not be billionaires, but we have strong values and a good reputation. My husband is a kind, respected man, a model civil servant his whole life. Kevin, as you know, is a manager at a big company, highly respected. And he's a wonderful husband, always helping his wife around the house. And my Tiffany is the sweetest girl you'll ever meet. All she does is study and practice her homemaking skills." I nearly choked on my water. Kevin helping his wife meant making a bigger mess. Tiffany's homemaking skills were so great she once tried to boil pasta without water. But I kept my silence, content to be a spectator in this absurd comedy. Martha shot me a sideways glance and continued her veiled attack. "Unlike some people, who are lucky enough to marry into a good family but don't appreciate it, all they care about is money, trampling all over sacred family bonds. I just hope that one day Tiffany marries a kind, understanding man from a generous family. It would be a tragedy if she ended up with in-laws who count every penny." James set his fork down. He looked directly at Martha, his gaze sharp, but his tone gentle. "With all due respect, Mrs. Higgins, I see it differently. In this economy, women work just as hard as men. Keeping finances separate can be a way for them to protect themselves and reduce the burden on their husbands. I think it's quite admirable that Emily can manage a career and a household while maintaining such clear boundaries." Martha was dumbfounded. She never expected her golden goose of a son-in-law to side with the enemy. Kevin, seeing his mother flounder, jumped in. "Well, what Mom meant was that married couples should be a little more flexible. Emily is brilliant, of course, just a bit rigid. Anyway, let's have a toast to Tiffany finding such a worthy man." Everyone raised their glasses, but the dark red wine in my glass reflected a collection of fake, grotesque smiles. I took a sip. The bitter taste on my tongue was a perfect match for the satisfaction in my heart. Their carefully constructed, model family facade was being peeled away, layer by layer, by their own ridiculousness. Tiffany tried to salvage the situation by serving James some food, but her hands were clumsy, and she dropped a piece of fried calamari onto the white tablecloth. Martha shrieked instinctively, "Oh my God, my $1,000 tablecloth! Look what you've done!" The piercing scream made everyone jump. Realizing her slip, Martha quickly covered her mouth and forced a laugh. "Oh, I just meant, what a shame. It'll be hard to clean." James looked at the growing grease stain, then at Tiffany's horrified expression and Martha's icy glare. He shook his head slightly, a gesture so subtle that only I caught it. He had seen through their charade of strong family values. The rest of the meal was pure torture for everyone except me. When the dessert of imported Korean pears, which Martha had bought at an exorbitant price to impress James, was served, I knew it was time for the grand finale. I wiped my mouth and pulled a small calculator from my purse, placing it on the table. The clicking of the keys was jarringly loud in the tense silence. Is everyone finished? While it's still fresh in our minds, allow me to summarize the expenses for tonight's festivities. Kevin's eyes widened. He hissed, "Emily, what the hell are you doing? We have a guest." "It's precisely because we have a guest that we must be clear, dear," I replied coolly. "James is a businessman. I'm sure he understands the value of transparency." I looked down at my calculator. Catering from the restaurant, $120. Imported fruit platter, $40. Beer and soda, $25. Electricity for lights and AC for approximately 2 hours, $5. Gas to reheat the food, $1. The grand total for this meet the future son-in-law party is $191. I looked around the table. There are 5 adults here, but James is our esteemed guest. Common courtesy dictates we don't charge him. Therefore, the cost will be split among the 4 family members. That comes to $47.75 per person. I turned to Kevin. "Honey, please send me your $47.75. I will then transfer the full amount to your mother, minus my share, of course." Kevin slammed his hand on the table, his composure finally breaking. "Shut up! Do you have any concept of shame? Are you trying to completely humiliate this family?" "Shame?" I laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Shame is when you sponge off your wife and parents, then lecture others about dignity. You know what that's called, Kevin? It's called being a fraud." I turned to Tiffany. "And you, Tiffany? You wanted to impress your boyfriend, but your mother paid for the food, and your sister-in-law did the cleaning. What exactly did you contribute, other than your charming smile?" "Send me your payment, my dear sister-in-law. You wouldn't want James to think you're an opportunist, would you?" Tiffany burst into tears and ran to her room, slamming the door. Martha shot up from her chair, pointing a trembling finger at me. Get out of my house right now. I don't have a disgraceful daughter-in-law like you." James also stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. His face was stern, but his voice remained polite. "Mrs. Higgins, please calm down. I have an unexpected emergency and must leave. Thank you for dinner." He then turned to me and nodded. "It was a pleasure, Emily. You're a very strong woman. I hope we meet again under more pleasant circumstances." With that, he turned and walked out, not even glancing at Tiffany's closed door. Kevin scrambled after him. "James, wait, let me explain." But James was already gone, disappearing into the elevator, leaving behind a family shattered by their own petty schemes. Martha collapsed back into her chair, sobbing hysterically. "Oh my God, she's ruined my family. I've lost my golden son-in-law." I calmly packed up my calculator and stood. "Whether you've lost him or not depends on his character, Martha. Real gold isn't afraid of fire. But fake gold? It turns to ash at the slightest touch. As for the money everyone owes, I'll add it to your tab, with daily compounding interest." After the elevator doors closed on James and on the Higgins family's hopes of a financial windfall, the apartment fell into a terrifying silence. Broken only by Martha's weeping and muffled sobs from Tiffany's room, Kevin returned, his face flushed with rage. He lunged at me, his hand raised to strike. I didn't flinch. I stared him down. "You dare hit me? Go ahead. Touch me." The security camera in the living room is recording. I will press charges for domestic assault. Your precious manager title will be gone before you can even make bail. His arm stopped midair. He clenched his fist, then lowered it, howling in helpless fury. "Why, Emily? Why did you do this? You enjoyed it, didn't you? Humiliating me, my parents, ruining my sister's future. You're a monster. A monster." I scoffed, stepping closer and poking him in the chest. "When your mother demanded we split the cost of a single chili pepper, was that monstrous? When you stood by her side and let me carry the financial burden of this entire household, was that monstrous? I am simply teaching you all a lesson in consistency." If you want to be fair and square, you have to be fair and square all the way, not just when it benefits you. Martha lifted her tear-streaked face. I took you in for years, treated you like my own daughter. Oh, please, I cut her off. Don't start with that tired old song. I've lived here for 3 years. I paid for my food. I did the housework. I cared for you when you were sick. When have you ever provided for me? The truth is, I've been providing for this entire family. The truth hurts, Martha, but it's time you accepted it. Your false pride won't pay the bills. George came in from the balcony, flicking a cigarette butt onto the floor, an act I would absolutely be charging a cleaning fee for. He looked at his wife, his son, and then at me, shaking his head in weary resignation. It's over. This house is rotten from the top down. Emily is right. We acted without integrity, so we can't blame her for being ruthless. He shuffled back to his room and closed the door, a lonely, defeated old man. He was perhaps the only one in this family with a shred of decency left, but his weakness had enabled this tragedy. Kevin collapsed onto the floor, clutching his head. Martha continued to mutter curses. I looked at them and felt nothing. No pity, no anger, nothing. The old Emily would have cried, apologized, tried to fix things. Now, they were just strangers, bad debtors I needed to deal with. I went to my room and locked the door. I checked my phone and saw a notification from my bank. My salary had just been deposited. A small smile touched my lips. As long as my finances were secure, I would never fall. Tonight, I would sleep more soundly than ever, in my comfortable bed, in the house that was truly mine. In the days that followed, our apartment became a true boarding house, 4 people living under one roof, but emotionally, they were worlds apart. There were no more shared meals, no laughter, not even any loud arguments. A cold, heavy silence permeated every corner. In the mornings, we moved like ghosts, avoiding eye contact in the hallway, using the kitchen at different times. Tiffany, after being unceremoniously dumped by James via text that same night, became withdrawn and sullen. She left early for class and came home late, locking herself in her room. She grew thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Sometimes she would glare at me with pure hatred, but I ignored it. She needed to grow up, and heartbreak is often the best teacher. Martha seemed to have lost her spirit. She no longer bothered with her hair or makeup, and she stopped gossiping with the neighbors, terrified they would ask about her rich son-in-law. She spent her days shuffling around the house, cooking bland meals for George and Kevin before collapsing onto the sofa to watch soap operas, the volume turned up to fill the vast emptiness of the home. Kevin was in the worst shape. He would come home from work and either disappear into his room to play video games or drink alone. He owed me money for rent, for the disastrous dinner party, even for the stolen yogurt. He pretended the debts didn't exist, and I didn't press him. I simply added them to my spreadsheet and sent him an automated payment reminder email every day. I knew the silence on his end was the sound of his pride dying a slow death. I, on the other hand, was reveling in my absolute freedom. I came home from work and cooked delicious meals for myself. I enrolled in an online yoga class and would practice in the living room, ignoring Martha's glares. I filled my room with fresh flowers, scented candles, and new books. I realized that when you stop expecting anything from others, you can no longer be hurt. One evening, as I was painting my nails in the living room, George broke the week-long silence. "Emily," I looked up. He was holding a glass of water, his hand shaking slightly. "Yes, Dad?" I just got my pension check. Here's $500 toward this month's rent. I'll figure out a way to get you the rest later. Please, take it." He held out the crisp bills. I looked at him, and my heart softened. In this dysfunctional family, he had the quietest voice, but was the only one with a sense of honor. I gently pushed his hand away. "Dad, please, keep it. You need it for your own expenses. My fight is with those who are able to work but choose not to, with those who are greedy and calculating. You're retired. I can't bring myself to charge you. Consider your share a gift from me." Tears welled up in George's eyes. He took my hand. "I'm so sorry, Emily. I'm so useless." I couldn't control my wife and son, and I let you suffer." I patted his hand. "It's not your fault, Dad. Everyone makes their own choices. This is the choice I had to make to save myself. Just take care of your health." Our brief conversation was cut short by a cold snort from the kitchen. Martha had heard everything. She was jealous that I was kind to her husband while being ruthless with her. She failed to understand that my kindness had a price, and that price was respect, something she had never given me. 4 people, 4 separate worlds, all adrift in the same cramped space. The final collapse was just a matter of time, and I waited for it calmly, like waiting for a cleansing rain to wash away the dirt of the past. The collapse I foresaw came sooner than I expected. It was a humid night at the end of March, the air thick and heavy. I was drifting off to sleep when I was jolted awake by a loud crash from my in-laws' bedroom, followed by Martha's frantic screams. "George! George, what's wrong? Oh my God, somebody help! Kevin! Emily!" My heart pounded. Despite the Cold War, my basic humanity wouldn't let me ignore such a desperate cry for help. I grabbed a robe and ran to their room. The scene was horrifying. George was on the floor, clutching his chest, his face a ghastly shade of blue. He was gasping for air, each breath a ragged, desperate heave. Martha was kneeling beside him, trying to shake him awake, crying hysterically. "Dad, what happened?" Kevin had also run in, his face a mask of sleepy confusion that quickly turned to terror. I took control. Assessing his symptoms, severe chest pain, difficulty breathing, cold sweat, I recognized the classic signs of a massive heart attack. "Stop shaking him," I yelled, pushing Martha aside. "Let him be still. Prop his head up slightly. Open a window. Kevin, call 911, now." Kevin fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. He stammered incoherently at the dispatcher. I snatched the phone from him. 911, what's your emergency? We have a suspected heart attack at the Grandview condominiums, apartment 12B. Male, 65, history of high blood pressure. He's cyanotic and having trouble breathing. Please send an ambulance to entrance B immediately. I spoke clearly and calmly, providing all the necessary details. After hanging up, I looked at the two of them. Martha was still sobbing, and Kevin had slumped to the floor, completely useless. "Kevin, get some clothes on your father. Martha, find his ID and insurance card. Hurry up, every second counts." My decisive tone snapped them out of their panic. In that moment of crisis, they forgot I was the enemy. I was their only lifeline. 15 minutes later, the wail of sirens filled the air. We got George into the ambulance. I rode with him to provide information to the paramedics, while Kevin and Martha followed in a taxi. Watching George fighting for breath under an oxygen mask, my heart ached. He was a kind, weak man, and even at death's door, he was suffering because of his family. At the hospital emergency room, even at 3 a.m., it was a chaotic swirl of noise and antiseptic smells. George was rushed into the cardiac care unit. A grim-faced doctor emerged a few minutes later. "He's had a major coronary artery blockage. His condition is critical. We need to perform an emergency angioplasty and place a stent immediately to save his life. The family needs to go to the admissions desk to pay the deposit and sign the consent forms." "How? How much is it?" Martha asked, her voice trembling. "The initial deposit is $2,000. The final cost will be determined after the procedure." The number hit them like a physical blow. Martha turned to her son. "Kevin, do you have the money? Pay for your father." Kevin stared at the floor. I don't. After paying off my credit card and other expenses, I only have about $150 in my account." "What? What happened to your $3,000 salary?" "You told me to keep my own money, so I spent it," he mumbled. Martha frantically dug through her purse and pulled out a savings passbook. "I only have this, $1,000 in my emergency fund, but the banks aren't open. All I have is $100 in my wallet. Between them, they could only scrape together a few $100s. George's life was hanging by a thread, and they were broke. They both turned to look at me, their eyes pleading a stark contrast to the scornful glares I was used to. "Emily," Martha whispered, grabbing my arm, tears streaming down her face. "Please, save your father-in-law. Do you have the money? Please pay the deposit. He's dying." I stood with my back against the wall, my arms crossed. I met her gaze. "Yes, I have money. I always keep an emergency fund." Martha's face lit up with hope. "Oh, thank God. Please, go pay it quickly. The doctors are waiting." But I didn't move. "Martha, have you forgotten?" "Fair and square. He is Kevin's father and your husband. The financial responsibility for his medical care falls on you and Kevin. As the daughter-in-law, under our new family constitution, I have no obligation to cover such a large expense." Kevin looked up, his eyes blazing with fury. "What are you saying? Dad is in there fighting for his life, and you're talking about being fair and square? Are you even human?" "I am human. A very principled human," I retorted coldly. "Kevin, when you were spending your money on gadgets and nights out with friends, did you ever think about your father getting sick? When you laughed as I paid for this family out of my own pocket, did you ever imagine this day would come? Now your father is in danger, and you, his eldest son, can't provide for him, so you blame me?" The doctor poked his head out of the unit. "The family needs to make a decision now. Every minute we delay reduces his chances of survival." Martha fell to her knees before me, sobbing. "I'm begging you, Emily. I'm on my knees. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, save him. Whatever you want when we get home, you can have it. If he dies, I can't go on." The sight of my once arrogant mother-in-law kneeling before me in a crowded hospital hallway was a spectacle. I felt no triumph, only a deep sadness for her desperation. I sighed and helped her up. "Get up, Martha. I'm not so heartless as to let a man die. I'll pay the deposit." They both gasped in relief. "But," I added immediately, "I'm not giving it to you. This is a loan." I walked to the cashier, swiped my card for $2,000, and took the receipt. I returned to where they were sitting. Kevin reached for the receipt, but I pulled it back. "Hold on. The money is paid, and Dad will be saved. But we need to be clear about the terms right now." I took out my ever-present notebook and a pen. I tore out a sheet and began to write. Promissory note lender, Party A. Emily Anderson, borrower, Party B. Kevin Johnson, on behalf of the family, loan amount, $2,000, $2,000 for the hospital deposit of George Johnson. Interest rate, 15% per annum. Current personal loan rate. Repayment term, 6 months from the date of signing. Terms. In case of default, lender reserves the right to seek legal remedy for wage garnishment or seizure of personal assets to recover the debt. I finished writing and handed the paper and pen to Kevin. "Sign here." He took the paper, his hand shaking with rage. He gritted his teeth. "You're making me sign a loan agreement? With my own wife? You're charging me interest?" "Kevin, we're living under a system where finances are separate. That $2,000 is my hard-earned money. I have no obligation to gift it to you. If you tried to get a cash advance right now, the interest rate would be much higher. I'm already giving you a family discount. Sign it. Let's keep things fair and square." Martha sat beside him, tears still streaming down her face, but she didn't dare say a word. She knew her husband's life was now in my hands. She had lost all leverage. "Sign it, son," she urged weakly. "Just sign it. We'll pay her back." Kevin looked at his mother, at me, and then at the closed doors of the CCU. Overwhelmed by helplessness and humiliation, he scribbled his signature, a shaky, distorted mess. "There. Are you happy now?" he spat, throwing the paper back at me. I checked the signature, folded the note carefully, and placed it in my wallet. "Very good. The contract is now in effect. I suggest you stay healthy so you can work hard and pay off your debt." I sat down on a nearby chair to wait. Kevin and Martha sat opposite me, huddled together in fear and anxiety. The physical distance between us was only a few feet, but it felt like a chasm between two different worlds, one of control and financial security, the other of dependence and destitution. 2 hours later, the operating room light went off. The doctor emerged, tired but smiling. The procedure was a success. We placed 2 stents. He's through the worst of it and stable for now. Martha burst into tears again, this time of relief. Kevin, too, had tears in his eyes. I let out a long, quiet breath. Whatever his faults, George was a decent man. I was glad he would be okay. George was moved to a recovery room. Hospital policy only allowed 1 visitor at a time, so Martha went in. Kevin and I were left waiting in the hallway. Dawn was breaking, and the pale morning light filtered through the hospital window, illuminating Kevin's exhausted face. He turned to me, his voice hoarse. "Thank you, Emily. No matter how cruel you've been, you saved my dad's life tonight. I saved him for my own conscience, not for you," I replied, my gaze fixed ahead. "Emily," he hesitated. That piece of paper. Can you just tear it up? I promise I'll pay you back. I swear on my honor. But please, don't let that exist between us. It's like a knife cutting us apart." I turned and gave him a bitter laugh. "Cutting us apart? What's left to cut? Where was this concern for our marriage when you and your mother were ganging up on me?" "That piece of paper didn't kill our marriage, Kevin. Your selfishness and callousness did a long time ago. That note is just the tombstone." He stared at me, stunned. "What do you mean?" I reached into my purse and pulled out another document, one I had prepared and signed long ago. Divorce papers. "I've already signed. Now it's your turn." Kevin looked at the papers, his face turning ashen. "You're asking for a divorce? Now? My dad just got out of surgery." "Yes." "It's because he's out of surgery that I'm giving this to you. I've waited until I fulfilled my final duty as a daughter-in-law. Now, my debt to your family is paid." I stood up and smoothed my clothes. "The condo is mine. I'm giving you and your parents 1 month to move out. I won't charge you rent for that month. Consider it a parting gift. As for the $2,000 loan, that contract stands. You can pay me back slowly, but if it's not paid in 6 months, I'll see you in court." Kevin was speechless. He wanted to beg, to plead, but one look at my cold, determined eyes told him it was too late. I was no longer the submissive, long-suffering Emily he once knew. I had been forged into a woman of steel in the fires of his family's greed and injustice. I turned and walked out of the hospital, merging into the morning rush of the city. I took a deep, cleansing breath, tasting the sweetness of freedom. No more scrutinizing mother-in-law, no more useless husband, no more dinners seasoned with tears. Ahead of me was a wide-open sky. I would go stay with my parents for a while, plant some succulents on their balcony, and start a new life. A life where being fair and square wasn't a weapon, but a foundation for self-respect. In the end, no one owes you anything in this life. The only debt you have is to your own peace of mind. A week after George was discharged, I returned to the condo one last time to pack my remaining belongings. The place felt gloomy and desolate. My life was neatly packed into cardboard boxes stacked in a corner. Martha sat hunched on the sofa, looking years older. From the bedroom, I could hear George's weak cough. Kevin sat at the dining table, staring into space. When I entered, Martha looked up, her eyes devoid of their former sharpness, filled only with weariness. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, letting out a long, defeated sigh. The movers I'd hired worked quickly, carrying my boxes to the elevator. The sound of tearing tape and heavy footsteps echoed in the silent apartment. "You're really leaving?" Kevin finally asked, his voice raw. I paused. "I am. I've already filed the papers with the court. You should receive a summons for mediation soon. Make sure you're available. Can't you give me one more chance?" he pleaded, taking a step toward me but stopping short at my icy glare. "I know I was wrong. My parents know they were wrong. This family needs you." "This family needs my money and my labor, Kevin, not me," I corrected him. "I gave you far too many chances. You used every single one to trample on my dignity. That's over now." I placed a set of keys on the table. "These are the spares. My realtor has the other set. At the end of the month, if you haven't moved out, they will begin eviction proceedings." Martha's voice trembled. "Emily, are you going to sell the condo? Where will we live?" "I'll either sell it or rent it out, depending on the market. As for where you'll live, that's your son's responsibility. You were always so proud of your manager's son. I'm sure he'll find a suitable place for you. I took one last look around the apartment that had once held all my hopes for a happy home. I had cherished every plate, every plant, every piece of furniture. Now, it was all just a collection of painful memories. I turned and walked out. As the heavy door clicked shut behind me, I heard Martha begin to sob. This time, I didn't look back. Downstairs, the moving truck was waiting. I got into a taxi to follow it, leaving the towering condominium and 3 years of my life behind. I didn't regret loving, and I didn't regret sacrificing. I only regretted that I had sacrificed for the wrong people. After I left, the Johnson family's life descended into chaos. I heard bits and pieces from a kind neighbor who still texted me occasionally. Kevin scrambled to find a new place to live. With his salary, a $2,000 debt hanging over him, I had insisted he start making monthly payments immediately. He couldn't afford a decent apartment. They ended up in a rundown rental house in a remote suburb, a 45-minute commute from his job. George's health was fragile, requiring constant medication. Martha, accustomed to a life of comfort, grew bitter and resentful in the cramped, damp house where she now had to do all the chores herself. The arguments became constant. "I can't stand this place. It's hot as an oven," she would complain. "Just deal with it, Mom. Where am I supposed to get money for a place with AC?" Kevin would snap back. "This is all your fault. You were too weak to keep your wife." "My fault? You're the one who started this whole fair and square nonsense." The cycle of blame was endless. Tiffany, too, was struggling. Without me as her personal ATM, she had to get a job as a waitress to support herself. The pampered princess was now weary and calloused. I ran into her once at the mall. She looked away in shame, unable to meet my eyes. The pressure crushed Kevin. He started driving for Uber at night to make ends meet. The well-dressed manager was gone, replaced by a tired, disheveled man. One night, he called me, drunk. "Emily, I'm so miserable. I was so wrong. Please come back. I'll be your slave for the rest of my life." "You're drunk, Kevin," I said calmly. "Go to sleep, and please don't bother me again." I hung up and blocked his number. I felt no pity, no lingering affection. Their present was the logical outcome of their past actions. Karma doesn't miss an address. Sometimes it just takes a while to arrive. The day of our divorce hearing was gray and rainy. I arrived with my lawyer, dressed in a sharp white suit, feeling calm and confident. Kevin came alone, looking haggard in old clothes. The proceedings were quick. We had no children, and since the condo was my premarital asset, there were no joint assets to divide. The judge affirmed my sole ownership, and Kevin got nothing. Martha, who had snuck into the back of the courtroom, burst into tears when she heard the verdict. "The court grants the dissolution of the marriage between Emily Anderson and Kevin Johnson," the judge declared. The sound of the gavel was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Outside, Kevin ran after me. "Emily, wait. I'm sorry. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. I will pay you back every cent." "Good," I said. "Keep that promise. It's the last shred of dignity you have left. Goodbye, Kevin." I opened my bright red umbrella and walked out into the rain, a splash of vibrant color against the dreary backdrop. 3 months later, on a crisp, sunny autumn morning, I sat on the balcony of my new home, a cozy studio apartment I bought after selling the old condo. I was surrounded by my beloved succulents, sipping chamomile tea. My phone buzzed. It was a bank alert, a deposit of $150. The memo read, "Kevin Johnson, payment 3. I smiled. He was keeping his word. I'd heard his family was slowly finding their footing. Hardship had taught them the value of work and money. I closed my book and stretched, breathing in the fresh air. My life was simple and peaceful now. My career was thriving, my weekends were spent with friends and family, and my home was my sanctuary. I held no grudges. The past had made me stronger. I had learned that a woman's happiness is not dependent on anyone else. It is forged from her own financial and emotional independence. Being fair and square isn't a bad thing, as long as it's built on respect. But when it becomes a tool for exploitation, it leads only to ruin. The sky above was a brilliant blue. A new day had begun, and I knew the best days of my life were still ahead of me. Living a life that was free, independent, and fair and square with myself, it was wonderful.